Possible thanks to the generous support of our Kickstarter backers. And by Neverending Nightmares, now available on Ouya and Steam. Learn more at neverendingnightmares.com.
Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired.
Sup, Holmes?
Beware your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Jesus. Wow. I hear it every week, but some weeks it actually scares me. And this is one of those weeks. Nina Freeman?
Yes.
Oh, good. I got it. Sometimes you never know. It could be Frymain or Freedom, or Silent D, or Invisible D. You make video games, and you're here on the show with us this week. Thank you so much. Yeah. How long have you been making those video games for?
Oh God. Okay, I guess I started like in, oh God, it must have been a year and a half or 2 years ago, probably. I started really like learning how to program and making my own games.
Really? Because I feel like I've heard of you
like
for years. No. Have you been involved with video games for longer than that in some other capacity?
I mean, I have had a lot of my friends are game developers, so I've been around, I guess, for a while, but the first things I released were like a year and a half or 2 years ago.
My goodness. You just have a...
I know, it's weird.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been in it for longer than that?
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while. It's just been like a crazy couple years, I guess. I've done like a lot in a really short amount of time, I think, because I'm like sort of a workaholic, so I've just like released a lot really fast.
That could explain it. How many games have you released so far?
That's a good question. Let me see.
I think I know.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 10 on my website. Yeah, it's like a little, I think I have like 10. I took some down at some point because they were so old, but about 10.
So old? Like older? Oh, right.
Yeah. I took down some that I like didn't like anymore, basically. I was like, no one's gonna play these. They're crappy.
Well, you never know. One of the things that comes up on the show a lot is people can't choose what they get famous for or what other people appreciate about them. But here you are, having worked with some pretty great developers yourself, and to Indiecade pretty soon. Is that next week already?
Yeah, next week. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
And what are you bringing to Indiecade?
How Do You Do It? A game I worked on with Emmett Butler, Jonathan Kataka, and Dekman Koss is a finalist in Indiecade. So we're really excited, and we're gonna go show it. Emmett, David, and I will all be there.
Awesome.
Showing the
I didn't know Jonathan Kataka worked on that. He worked on Adenine too, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Same artist.
Oh, cool.
Jonathan Jonathan also did art for Space Dad, one of the other games that I worked on. Actually, same team as How Do You Do It?
Cool. I don't even know where to start because people may have seen you in headlines. You've been talked about on Kotaku and Polygon.
Oh, yeah.
They might not know what your games are. What was the first game that you made and released?
The first one I released, let's see, I guess the first one I released was Hokuto no Huchen, which is Fist of the North Carp, which is a game I made with Emmett Butler, who I just mentioned. He's worked with me on like a ton of games. We made that at a game jam about 2 years ago, and it's a game about you play as like young me, basically, because like basically all my games are about myself. You play as me as a kid, and you're on a fishing trip with your dad, and he's like catching all these fish, and he wants you to like take them off the line when he catches them, but you don't want to get fish slapped. So you see, and fish slap means like you just get hit in the face by a fish because you like are not, you like get, because he's swinging the fish all over the screen with his like fishing rod.
Sure.
So you're trying to like dodge the fish as he's swinging it around, and then you have to like jump on it to get it off. So it's really about a time where this literally happened, where my dad was like, "Can you take this fish off the line?" And he swung it, and it slapped me in the face when I was like a little kid, and I always thought that was really hilarious. So we made a game about that. It's just like a score chasing game where you try and get as many fish as possible.
Is it on computers? Can I play it?
Yeah, it's a Flash game. It's on my site. It's just if you go to ninasays.so/games, it's like on the bottom row and there's a little dad. But yeah, that's
Who made
online. It's been online for a while.
Yeah. Who? I knew that already, but I was pretending I didn't. So like the listeners will be like, "Oh, can I let me play that now?" And there it is. It's a
Yeah,
Flash game.
if you wanna go get fish slapped by my pixelated father, then you should go do that.
Who did the graphics on that one?
Let's see. That was Emmett who did the art. Actually, I think I did some of the art too. Oh, and yeah, David worked with us on that game too. David Deckman-Koss did the music for that game. She's done music for like I think all of my games maybe except for one. So it was Emmett, David, and I that did it all together at a game jam.
Oh, awesome. And
Yeah.
There's so many different ways I can go from here. The idea of autobiographical is something that, for a lot of people, it feels like a very new concept still. And there aren't a ton of them out there, from what I can tell, that are directly autobiographical, compared to, how many indie 2D platformers there are, AAA shooters or whatever.
Yeah.
Like autobiographical, I don't know if that's even a Steam genre yet in the Steam curation. But it's pretty much...
It should be.
Yeah, it should be, and hopefully it will be. Did you ever want to make games that weren't autobiographical, or from the start did you think what's going to be fun is to make them about your own life experiences?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because when I'm like coming up with these ideas for games, I do usually draw from my own experience, but I never really think of myself as someone making explicitly autobiographical games. I usually think of them as, I like to make vignette games, that's what I like to call them, but a lot of them are autobiographical, and I think that that is because my background's in poetry, and in poetry, like, I was taught under Professor Charles North, who sort of part of this like post-New York school like group of poets, and they were very much into like writing about small, everyday, like ordinary life stuff. So that's the kind of like thing I was working on before I started making games. And when I was writing poetry a lot, it was largely autobiographical, but that was never a term we really used. That was just like, you just did that, and it wasn't really like a question. And it's kind of interesting in games that it's like autobiographical is now like a way, like people are like, oh, you're an autobiographical game designer, and I'm like, oh, that's so weird, like I never thought about that, but I guess my games are all like that. But I tend to think of them more as like vignette games because it's just like scenes. Like I like to make games about like small things, whether they're autobiographical or not. It just so happens that like the way I learned to write poetry happened to use a lot of these like kind of autobiographical elements, and then that kind of like followed me into my game design career, I guess.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. When you have been creative in one way, in one medium, your brain just gets trained to think, well, where do I pull my ideas from, and then how do I go about it, and how much do I want to ask the audience to like get involved? Do I want to keep them occupied for 18 hours, or do I want to keep them occupied for a page? And your mind sounds like it's trained to just make a page of a game for people.
Yeah, and I'm really into like sort of the reason I keep talking about vignettes is because that, like, I don't know if you've ever read like poets like Frank O'Hara. He's like a pretty well-known poet that I studied a lot of. And a lot of his poems, like he has a famous book of poems called Lunch Poems, which are all poems he wrote, I believe, on his lunch breaks when he was working at a museum. And one of my favorite poems from that book, I can't remember the name, but it's just sort of an account of him walking down the street in Manhattan, and he like talks about all the things he sees on this walk. And that's sort of like, that kind of like slice of an experience is the kind of narrative that I'm really interested in exploring. So like I keep trying to come up with new ideas that are attempting to capture these like smaller moments, because I think that they're really beautiful. And I think that games, there are some games like I think of Dysphoria and like Gone Home as examples of games that kind of try and get at these like sort of smaller moments in life, but it's definitely not as common. But I'm definitely interested in that sort of thing because that's like what I learned to love in poetry. So now I'm sort of trying to find that in games.
Wow. And how come? Why do you think it is? Because I'm sure being a poet, this kind of vignette, this kind of slice of life, look at how it means, how it feels to be alive and what that means. You've got a built-in audience there. Poem fans are like all about that. And whereas video game fans, it's it's a pretty wide umbrella of video game fans. But generally speaking, no one that I know of has made it big off of autobiographical vignette games, have they? Anna's pretty well known now, which is nice.
Yeah, Dysphoria is
she's-
definitely like it was a game I played Dysphoria really early on when I started making games, and that was had a huge impact on the kind of games I make now, because I was like, oh, this is exactly like the kind of thing I can imagine like having been in sort of like a poem form. I was like, I can really relate to this as someone who writes poetry. Like, this seems like a form that I can sort of enter in a similar way to the way that Anna was doing it. So she was a huge inspiration for me, especially that game.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's been a huge inspiration for a lot of people I've met, which has been great to see. But none of these people yet, despite rumors that there is an indie game, Cibele, where everyone is filthy rich and manipulating the media. Despite that, I don't know any rich autobiographical game developers. I know of them, actually. I think Anna's done just as well financially with her books and her zines and stuff as she has done with her games. Don't quote me on that, but that's the sense that I get. So what do you think it is about trying to combine video games with the language, or the at least the priorities of poetry that appeals to you? It's certainly not because you think it'll make you rich, I don't think. I'm doubting.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that someday I will be able to sell a game. I mean, I've never ever sold a game yet. All of my games have been free so far. So it'll be interesting once I delve into that territory, because that introduces a whole new challenges. But I think what's interesting about coming from poetry is that my expectations of narrative are so different than I think a lot of people who come straight into games. Okay, wait, I didn't say that correctly. I think people who come straight into games with like a technical background, or like a background that's very heavily focused on games, have different expectations about narrative than I have coming from poetry.
Sure.
And I think that would be true for anyone coming from a different medium to another medium. Like, every medium has different expectations that are like cultural norms, right? So I think that I definitely like, I get a kick out of challenging those expectations. So I sort of saw an opportunity, and like, I was like, okay, I feel like I am pretty good at writing poetry, and I like understand how to like write things that are interesting. So how can I take that and apply it to games where that kind of narrative technique is less often used? And like, how can I sort of meld those together in a way that's interesting? Because that feels really fun to me as like a creative person, to sort of like take this like thing that I spent so much time working on in the past, which is all this poetry that I've written, and then take it into games and be like, how can I take these ideas that I'm really into and like think about them in a game design context? And that's how actually How Do You Do It? The idea for How Do You Do It came from a poem that I had written last, oh God, it's been like 3 years since I wrote that poem. But I wrote a really long poem, and there was a stanza that was about basically what How Do You Do It's about. I think the actual stanza in the poem was about how I was hanging out with a friend. We were playing Barbie dolls when we were little kids, and she ripped the leg off of my Ken doll while she was like pretending that the Ken doll was having sex with the Barbie doll. So it got too rough, and she ripped the leg off. So I wrote a poem about that because I thought it was hilarious. And I was rereading that poem, and I was like, oh my God, this is such like a visceral memory, and like I can already kind of see the game mechanic coming out of it. So I like when those two worlds of mine can like sort of like mesh in that way.
Yeah, wow. It's not, you see how you don't hear Hideo Kojima saying, well, I was hanging out with my friends and they were making their Barbie dolls pork, so I wanted to make
Yeah.
You can see how this isn't something you hear every day in video game industry.
And I mean, I think also just like, obviously culturally, I think a lot of people are they're like a little afraid to talk about sex because it feels like something that's very personal, and I just happen to be like a very talkative person and have no qualms talking about sex or like my memories about it or whatever. So I think that's also like a part of my personality where I'm like, oh my God, I remember this hilarious sex joke that I made when I was like 13. I'm gonna make a game about it. It wasn't even a joke. So like I'm willing to talk about that stuff. I don't even know why. It's just like something I've always been like that, I guess. Just like too much information constantly.
Yeah, well, it's something that I think video games can use more of, and I'm both happy that you're making games and sad that there aren't more people like you doing it. Before the show, well, it's true, because to have this kind of social comfort and extroversion, a form of extroversion anyway, an openness in your game design is something that, most game designers I know, I've said, well, that's a really cool idea. You could make a game out of that, like that thing that happened in your life. And they're like, oh, nobody would care. They want fantasy.
I hate that attitude. It makes me sad.
Yeah, me too. Super sad. And I don't blame them for having it, though. I was just at this video. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Before the show, we were talking a little bit, and I was at a indie comics expo that I wasn't even going to go to, because last time I went to a comic book convention, I was in my teenage years, and I had a lot of fun. I bought like bootleg Dragon Ball Z tapes before that show was on TV. Yeah, it was great. I still have them lying around somewhere. But it was like all dudes, all escapism, cool stuff. I like dudes. I like escapism. Nothing against that. But like that was the culture, 100%. Just got back from this indie comics expo. It was like, I want to say 75% of the presenters there, and there was over 100 were women, and it was all autobiographical comics. Yeah, it was so great. And I went with a 9-year-old and my wife and my high school sweetheart, who I'm still friends with 20 years later, and they did a workshop teaching little girls, like, the story of your life could be a fun comic. Learn how to draw yourself.
That's really cool.
It is. When are video games going to catch up to that? I was the whole time I was thinking, this is perfect for Nina. I wish you were here. And also, like, how can you be giving a workshop at this thing and tack on? You could also make comics too, kids. It would have been so great.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've ran into this. I taught a Twine and JavaScript workshop with Code Liberation, along with Kat Small, her and I taught the class together. She taught the coding portion, I taught like a narrative portion. And when I was teaching that class, my slides were all about I wanted to talk to them about vignette games, and like, because I've made vignette games in Twine, and I was like kind of sharing those and being like, oh, like, a workshop's a good setting to like make a tiny game. Like, here's some examples of tiny Twine games I've made, and like a lot of them are really personal, and I pointed that out. And I think we run this class twice, and I think both times I've had, because our classes are all women, just as a side note, so one of the women in each of the classes, it might have even been more, I can't quite remember, but I had women asking me how I could find it in myself to like be so honest about like in my games, like how I could talk about, because I made a game Mangia, which is all about how I got diagnosed with this like chronic illness and how difficult it was. And they were like, I don't know if I could I would feel really shy about sharing that kind of thing like publicly. And I'm always like, it's really interesting to me to hear people say that to me, especially other women, because I'm like, oh, like, okay, I totally understand that feeling, and like it's totally legitimate, and there are certain things that are like really personal that like you don't want to share, and that's totally fine. But I was like, I urge you to share like, whatever you feel safe sharing, because it can be really empowering to be able to tell your own story in your own words, and then to have other people come to you who hear your story and be like, oh wow, I went through something similar, or like I can totally relate, or like, people will often have supportive things to say for you if you share a personal story through a game or a poem or through like any medium. So that's something that I always tell people. I'm just like, you'll be surprised, like someone out there is going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said this, because like I've been struggling with something like this too. And then you have a dialogue, and it's like, it's really powerful to start those kinds of conversations, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yet there's this fear that holds a lot of people back. I've got a theory about human beings. I'm going to run it by you real quick. I'm also, on top of video game stuff, I'm also a full-time behavioral health therapist. Did you know that?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Wow, I
weird.
didn't
So
know that. That's so cool.
yeah, it's fun. I love that part of my life too. And I've been talking to people a lot lately that can't figure out why they're held back from doing things they think they want to do, but then they just don't do them. Or there's things they don't want to do, but they do them anyway. They're trying to understand why they can't just have the free will to be who they think they should be. But they can't do it a lot of the time. And my guess is they are confounded by the three motivators. My theory is there's three motivators. Things in the love group, and that includes compassion, empathy, feeling connected to other people. The fear group, which includes anger, frustration, self-criticism, oftentimes criticism of others, and they overlap like the MasterCard symbol. So you
Yeah.
can have fear and love at the same time. Then the third one is boredom. And you can have all three, but not at the same time. I think you can have fear and love and boredom, fear and boredom, like that. But if you had three at the same time, the love and fear would overwhelm the boredom because you can't be bored when you're in a codependent relationship, I've
Yeah.
found, sadly. And that's love and fear together. Anyway, you have found people will love you. I hope so. When you make these games where you share
Yeah.
who you are, but
Absolutely.
but other people are afraid to do that. What do you think you could do to help them overcome their fear of being rejected, being judged, being, I guess, ashamed if they made an autobiographical game? Is that what do you think they might be afraid of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best tactic that it's something that worked for me in the past because like I wasn't always like when I started I think I started becoming more used to sharing this kind of stuff about myself when I was writing poetry because my professor was like, oh, like write, like here, read this poet and like write something inspired by them. And I was reading a lot of poets that were doing very personal work, so I was like, oh, maybe I should do that. And then once I started doing that, I just had my close friends read it, or like my family or whatever, and like hearing the feedback from them initially sort of encouraged me to like share my work with more people. So I feel like if you just build yourself like a network of people that you can share your stuff with, that helps a lot. So like I know I definitely did that with Mangia. Mangia was probably like one of the hardest games that I ever like made emotionally. Like it was really difficult emotionally because it's about illness and like it was like only a year after I'd been diagnosed with this illness and it was like still something that I had a lot of emotional issues with. But you know, I had my boyfriend read through like my drafts and then play through the game when I was done with it. And like I had other people who had been around me during that time that I knew like understood the story of what I was trying to tell through the game. And then hearing their feedback, which was largely positive, helped me sort of feel confident enough to like release it publicly. Because I was like, okay, so you know, I feel like I'm representing myself in this game in a way that reflects how I feel about that experience. And also, like, I know there's so many other people that struggle with being diagnosed with chronic illness. So I was like, you know, if I don't release this, and I don't know if anyone else is, so like I want to reach out to those people who are feeling as awful as I did back then, and like that makes me feel good about myself. Hopefully it'll help make them feel good, like they're not like alone in their struggle. So I guess a combination of all those factors sort of helped me feel confident enough to release it. So it's like building yourself a positive network and then finding ways to reassure yourself that like there's going to be a positive exchange at the end of the road.
Mm-hmm. How does it feel, though, when you deal with criticism by people whom I would guess there's going to be two camps, people whom are into the kind of game you're making but have particular criticisms that, you know, for whatever reason it wasn't fully compatible with them and they point that out to you. But I'd have to imagine there's a larger group of people who step into a video game saying, all right, what are you going to do for me? And then start playing it and find out, wait, this is about somebody else? This is about making me feel like a certain kind of person? Like on Twitter the other day, so there was this big, massive thing getting thrown around about why social justice warriors are jerks. And the reason is we or they, depending on how I'm grouped by whoever I'm talking about, want to make games that are not games to say what other people's lives are like, and that is rude because the player should come first, and the developer should put themselves in the back seat and say, whatever makes you happy, boss. I'll make a game that makes you feel fantastic about yourself instead of like showing you that sometimes life is hard and stuff like that. And they're going on to say, like, I can't believe Gone Home got good reviews because, geez, somebody's going to buy that for their kid because you've got a good review, and then their kid's going to be so sad that they're playing a game where you're a human being and not, someone kicking ass somewhere. Yeah, I know, God forbid, right? And to me, that's like saying you shouldn't give, like, a drama a good review because a kid might not like it or something. Like, it just doesn't add up. But anyway, yeah, so you're at this point in your career, it seems like, where more and more eyes are on you, and you're going to be involved with more and more people who are going to step in to play your game and be disappointed for the sheer fact that it's not a fantasy or an escapist experience. Has that been difficult?
Yeah, it's really funny that you bring that up because I've been struggling with that a lot recently. Because this game I'm working on now, Cibele, is about like a very personal part of my life that like is something that I've been sitting on for a really long time. I didn't even write about it. I've only made this game about it, and like it's really, really difficult because it's about my relationship with this guy that I met in an online game when I was like a teenager, and that relationship was like romantic. So it's about, you sort of play as me playing this online game, and you sort of experience my relationship with this guy. And I've been playtesting it a lot, and I've been playtesting it with like friends and like people, other like games people, but also I've been trying to playtest it with as many people who aren't, people within my social circle or people who are, not playing games all the time. I like to find those people. And there's been a number of times where a playtester has played and then turned around and been like, oh, so this isn't really a game. And I'm like, stab to the heart.
And that's, I guess, because I'm big on the comics analogy right now, because I feel like comics are hopefully where video games will be in 10 years, where there's expos where it's all female developers. Not every expo is like that, but some expos, and it's all about autobiographical games. I feel like it took comics like Mouse and Persepolis and stuff like that for it to happen. But, nobody turns around and reads a comic about somebody's life instead of about a superhero and says, well, this isn't really a comic. Or they do and say, no, it's a graphic novel. It's better than a comic anyway, you jerk. So, but you were feeling like that was a disappointment. They were voicing disappointment with you that they didn't get a game out of you. Is that how it felt? Yeah?
I think it's just, my feelings about it are, one, that's great feedback for me because I need to figure out how to change the design of the game to sort of like include as many players as possible. And two, it's interesting because it really, proves to me something that I already know, which is that expectations of what video games are so deeply ingrained in like our society that like people are just willing to like, even if you tell them that it's a game, like I was like, here's my video game, will you play test it? They're still like, it's not, because that expectation is just such like, it's, drilled into your head by like, these corporations that are making these huge games, and like those are the only games that a lot of people see, because like not everyone's like playing indie games, not everyone has the resources to access lots of different kinds of games. So people get expectations, and I think that it's a design challenge to sort of make games that aren't normative accessible to people who have those kinds of expectations. And I take that as a positive challenge, but I also like to engage with people like that in conversations and be like, why do you think that? It's not, I've had trouble doing that because, it's like, I've only just started playtesting this game, so I'm like, oh no, it like makes me sad. But one of the things that I'm going to start doing more is being like, oh, if you don't think this is a game, what do you think it is? Why do you think it's a game? Like, can you like talk to me about that? Because I think if you just talk to people about why they have these expectations about games, and maybe you can help like educate them a little bit about how like games can be more than what you expect. Like games are a huge medium with lots of potential, and I think that's just something we need to talk more about, as like
Absolutely.
a games community.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know if you know anyone at Sony, Sony would love you. Sony wants this out there big time. Like you were speaking about big corporations, and I agree. So many of the big video game publishers are like, they're looking at how indie developers are making money, and they're thinking, uh-oh, what if people without money can make more money than us? Then what's the point of us? Like, the one thing we have is money. So we need to tell people the only games worth playing are ones that took a lot of money to make, and as long as people believe that, they'll only buy our games, and we'll be rich for longer.
Yeah, marketing is a huge, factor in this whole conversation for sure.
Absolutely. The whole term gamer, which has been talked about so much lately, hopefully people are done talking about it for a little while, but like gamer wouldn't be a thing people take pride in if it weren't for the fact that marketing companies have told you, like, be proud of being the most hardcore gamer and buy my game and get my achievements and live your life my way because it makes you feel good about yourself. You know, that's not the only reason, but definitely a big part of it. To me, gamer is anyone who's just excited about video games, which would be someone who wants to know about video games that are outside of what they've played before, like what you're doing. I'm curious about Cibele, though. What do you think it is about? I don't know if you want to talk about it too much, but I am very curious. What makes it a game that people might not think this is a game? Does it not have a ton of interactivity? Does it not have like a high score or something?
So basically, I think one factor is that there is a bunch of short films in the game, and the game itself opens with a short film with like live human actors, and I think that sort of people don't expect games to have actual footage in them most of the time, like, because it's not even CG, it's like actual film with live actors, and that's not something you see in games really often. So I think that the game opens with that is maybe kind of jarring for some people, and they're like, oh wait, is this a game or a movie? And then it's interesting because the game itself, since it's about playing an online game, actually is one of the most gamey games that I've made in a sense, because like it's about kind of traditional games, traditional like MMO games. It's based on my time playing Final Fantasy Online, so it's sort of modeled after that kind of a game, but I'm boiling down the mechanics to the essentials, so it's basically just a point-and-click game, but there's also like a really important audio element, so it's very much about like the audio in conversation with the short films and like kind of talking about the tension between those two things while also letting you play in this game space. But it's not saying like, oh, you completed level 1 or like you need to like kill a dozen enemies before you can like unlock the next dungeon or whatever. Like, I don't put any of that stuff in because it's extra to me and it's not relevant to the narrative or to exploring the narrative. So I definitely take out a lot of sort of MMO gamey elements that may, like people might then think that it's less of a game because of that. Maybe, I'm not really sure. But I think a huge factor is the short films for sure. But
it might just be my age, but I grew up when FMV was getting big, and like those were cutscenes then. Like you start Resident Evil 1, and it's like a movie of a guy with a fake beard being scared of a fake dog, and you're like, this is awesome. Like you were hungry for that, and I'm excited to see FMV coming back. Hearing that it's in your game makes me want to play it even more. And from there, I love it. It's what is special about FMV? I could go on about that, but I want to talk.
Well, if you grew up with Final Fantasy, then you're gonna love it. It's
sure. And it's
a deep part of your soul.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did grow up on Final Fantasy, as a lot of people did. So do you play as you hearing...
Yeah.
So you're playing the game and you're hearing the voice of the guy that you're MMOing with?
So like when you're playing an online game like it's modeled after Final Fantasy, but like World of Warcraft or any of these games, and if you're super into the game, you usually are like with a team and you're kind of like talking on your headsets about like what's going on in the game or whatever. So it's about two younger people that are playing the game on that level where they're like on their headsets all the time, like talking about whatever they're fighting and whatnot, but it's also about like they're kind of alone chatting a lot, and you hear what they're talking about by themselves sort of as their relationship grows. Does that kind of make sense? Like, did you ever use Ventrilo or anything? Sort of like that.
Yeah, I Vent, yes. It totally makes sense. Sounds so. Are you hearing both sides of the conversation as though you're overhearing it? Got it. Huh. I'm guessing that people would be hungry to somehow like Seaman, Hey You, Pikachu style, like be the one to respond to the AI and be like, you look hot right now, or whatever, and be the one involved in the
Yeah, so it's
flirting.
not, yeah, it's not gonna be like, it's not like you're just sitting there listening to audio the whole time. There's definitely like interactive elements to that, but that's a secret. But it's not like you're just sitting there like kind of clicking on the screen idly. It's definitely like it's about being the girl. So I want to like put players in her shoes essentially. So it's about emulating her experience of playing that game and sort of listening to the kinds of this conversation that's happening. Does that kind of make sense?
It makes total sense. It sounds
Yeah.
very exciting. It's the exact kind of so weird. I was thinking today, not knowing exactly what Cibele was about. I read a little bit about it, but I didn't realize all of this. Like, why can't we just make a game that like simulates what it's like to be a girl? Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
like you can play as a girl in games, but like a game that's explicitly about like ever wonder what it's like to be a girl? Here's your game. That hasn't
Yeah.
been around as of yet. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm remembering those poor French guys who made Remember Me. They
Oh yeah.
were told explicitly, like, well, if you make a game about being a girl, it's going to make guys feel uncomfortable, like, especially if they see their player character kissing a guy. They're going to be like, oh no, I've got virtual guy cooties in my mouth because I watched my avatar be romantic with the, yeah, like, I don't know if the, and your sounds very much like your game is headed in that territory. It's like how it is to get romantic on an MMO as a teenage girl. Do you think that's
Mhm.
going to freak people out?
I think so. I guess I have two responses to that. One is that I think, one of the reasons that we should continue to urge like people to make more autobiographical games is because like someone can try and make a game about being a girl, but in the end it's always like it's more important to explore like individual experiences of women, and I'm sure you know this, like that's why games like Dysphoria and like Gone Home are really important because it's like this kind of unique sort of like these unique stories about women that aren't trying to like boil women's experience down to this kind of universal thing because there's surely universal experiences that we all have, but I think the more interesting things, especially to explore in games, are like individual experiences because I think that we don't have enough of that in games right now, and like if we want to hear more sort of like meaningful women's stories in games, then we need to see more stories that are about like individual women in different kind of walks of life and whatnot. So I think that's really important. And I think that, as people see more games about these different kinds of experiences that don't sort of adhere to their expectations of video games being about like warriors or like Marines or whatever, if they start to expect games to be about these things these lives that, are not necessarily similar to their own life experience, then people will be more comfortable, I think, like sort of playing a game like Cibele and being like, okay, now I'm playing a game about this person's experience, and let me sort of take that for what it is and not try and like shape it to be like as if it's about me. Well, like the game's about me, like me, Nina, but
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to, do you know what I mean? I don't know. This is kind of a roundabout way of saying that I think it's really important that more women make games about themselves so that people can see that like there's tons of different experiences that women have.
Hmm.
And I think that the same goes for men too. Like people of all genders and ethnicities and everything should be making games about their individual experiences because that's how we sort of like get a richer medium. And I think that, you see that in other forums, and I think games just needs more of that in general. And I hope that Cibele can contribute to that movement in some way.
So
It's
well
definitely
said.
very specific to my life.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like you would encourage anybody to make a game about them as an individual to help, not only because
Yeah.
it's interesting, because like we get to be alive for how long? What are we going to do with that time? Wouldn't it be neat to get to know each other? And this is, to me, even more so
Yeah.
than comics. Comics are awesome because you can draw a little icon like Charlie Brown, and everyone relates with them. So you can read a comic about anyone in the world, but if they're drawn in a certain way, everybody can empathize. Video games even better because you're actually it's like the ultimate empathy tool for communication, in my opinion. You're actually Nina. You're sitting there with the headset on, hearing the conversation in the fake MMO. Oh, what's the name of the fake MMO? I love fake MMOs. You know,
You want to know the name?
yeah, I totally do. But if it's a secret, that's
Baltimary.
what? Say it again.
No, it's okay. It's Baltimary.
Baltimary?
Baltimary.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Does that have significance, or is it just a name you like?
A lot of the names in the game came from Finnish words that I really like. So Baltimary is a Finnish word because I am Finnish and I think it's a beautiful language. So I just kind of found a bunch of words that I liked and that had sort of meanings that were related to the kinds of things I'm exploring in the game.
Yeah. Balta, does it mean something?
It means I'm blanking out Baltimary. I can look it up really quick.
Sure.
I know it means like sea. It's like an ocean, kind of about ocean. Oh, Baltimary. Finnish. I'm just like Googling it now. Oh my gosh, how did I even find it originally? I
Interesting.
can't exactly remember right now. I had it written down somewhere. But oh yeah, it means ocean. It just means ocean.
Just ocean.
Right.
A big wide.
Yep, Baltimary means ocean in Finnish.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that your creative process is such that you're going by your instincts, it sounds like. Big time.
Yeah,
So
well,
like,
I really like naming things, so that's one of the first things I usually do is I like name everything. So really early on when I first came up with the idea, I was like looking up I was like, I want like a bunch of Finnish names, so I looked up a bunch of words and kind of like laid everything out in that way. So I don't know, I guess that's a weird quirk.
I suppose so. It gives it first of all, it's easier to organize things once they're named, but it also gives it like an identity and a feeling. Like Baltimore gives you a feeling right away. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to come up when I'm making games. If I have the opportunity to, I like to sort of nail down the tone that I want before I even start getting into the nitty-gritty code stuff. I like to kind of like gather my thoughts and be like, okay, what's the ultimate atmosphere that I'm going for here, and how can I like support that?
Sure.
So, that's why I start with names often, because I think names can be really meaningful if you put thought into them.
Well, yeah, you strike me as the kind of person whom will get more invested when you have any sort of relationship, when there's a give and take already, and that includes with the game that you make. So once you name it, you've got a relationship with Baltimary, and then you can't let it down.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, I'm not going to make you today, Baltimary. It's like, oh no, poor Baltimary's got to get made. So you start coding, that was just a total offhand guess. Has that been the case for a while? Have you, like growing up, what video games did you play, and did you find yourself gravitating towards games about dynamic stories, interpersonal relationships, or was there ever a time when you were just a hardcore shooting guys and girls video game fan? Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess, so, I mean, I've been playing video games forever. I guess the games that really, I grew up in like the 90s and 2000s, so I was, like playing games a lot when like the N64 came out, when the PS1 came out. So, like Mario 64 and like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, those are some of my earliest games that I have really fond memories of. But I don't think I really was captured by video games like in a very passionate way until I played Final Fantasy X, which like really like that's probably one of my favorite games like of all time. And I think I definitely got it the year it came out. I was really young. I was a teenager. I don't remember what year that was. But I've been playing video games a lot, and like, I had all these consoles and whatnot. That was like the only thing I ever wanted for Christmas was video games. And I really liked them, but when I played Final Fantasy X, it like captured me in a totally different way. And I think that's because like I really liked sort of exploring, because Final Fantasy X to me, I've been replaying it recently actually, is very much about like these individual characters, and you get to sort of see a lot of really like almost vignette-like exchanges during the game. So like, for example, the other day I was playing and I was in, I think, Kilika, and it's after Sin destroys that town, and you're walking around as Titus, and you can see a little girl hiding like in a broken down shack, and there's no real reason for you to go over there and talk to her, but I was like, oh, like, that's weird. Why is that like character over there just like sitting there looking scared. So I went over and talked to her, and it was like totally out of the way. But I went over, and then it triggered the scene where Titus like saves this like small child, and then she like runs away to go tell her sister, and then you have this whole conversation with her and her sister. And it's this really interesting moment where I'm like, wow, I could have just like totally walked by and missed this, and like I would have never known that that could have happened. So there's tons of these like little vignette moments in Final Fantasy X that like really made me just want to explore the world like as thoroughly as possible, because I just wanted to see all of these tiny scenes that they had put in that don't necessarily have an effect on like the overall plot of the game, but are just building these characters. So I think that, you know, when I saw a game doing that, like really, really going deep on these characters, I was super attracted to that. I don't think I understood that that's why I liked it as a kid, but in retrospect, that was definitely a big reason for me. Because then I'd go and like write fan fiction about them and be like, oh my god, like I'm like Riku, and like this is why, and like I'm gonna write all these stories about things that happen in the game, and like it just like opened up this whole world of like exploring these characters that I really enjoyed as a kid.
Huh. And was there anybody supporting your interest in video games at that time? Where you like, because as a teenager, it's all about like, well, what do my peers think of what I'm doing? You can't help but have that intrusive thought. Did you hang around with a lot of other people that played video games?
So my parents always hated that I played video games. I lived with my mom, and she like she was just like, you need to stop playing video games. But I would just do it anyways. I was really stubborn. And I had these two friends, Melanie and Brittany, they're twins, and they actually both ended up going to school for game design, and you know, are working on game stuff now, so it's like kind of amazing. But the three of us grew up playing video games together, and I think it was one day where we all went out to West Coast Video together to rent games, and I know we like played Final Fantasy X together, I believe for the first time, or one of the first times I played it was with them. And we played a ton of games together. We played like, when Ocarina of Time came out, we were even younger. We probably weren't even teenagers, and we played that whole game in their basement. It was so fun. So I had my two girlfriends that I played video games with, but otherwise I didn't have many friends that played video games other than them. At least really early on, you know, as I got older, I met other people. But when I was young, it was those two, and also I made a ton of like fan sites on the internet for games. When I was like, I think when I was 13, I bought my first domain name. So I got involved with this sort of online community of like teenage girls making fan sites about video games. So like then I had them too. So it's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but that was like my community of video games people when I was younger.
Amazing. I wonder, because I can't help but think like, where were people like you when I was a teenager? Like I would have been.
We were hiding in our bedrooms making websites, talking to each other on AIM.
Because I'm a fair amount older than you. I'm not sure if you might have existed, but without the internet, would you have, you know, found out about games in the same way and found a community to kind of give you a feeling about video games that you're like, I can connect with people on this? I don't know. I don't know if it would have. Fan sites at 13. Was it a Final Fantasy X fan site? Did you start with?
I probably made one. I'm trying to remember what my first ones were. There were also a lot of anime fan sites. I remember like I made fan sites to Sailor Moon characters, and I had a Love Hina fan site, if you know that anime. And I remember I made a fan listing for Zhang Hua from Soul Calibur because I loved her so much. She was like my favorite fighting game character. I don't remember if I made any Final Fantasy X ones. There were so many good Final Fantasy X ones back then that I was a little intimidated because I was like, I can't compete. But I made Zhanghua one, and Love Hina, Ultramaniac is another anime. I made so many. Like, it's really ridiculous. I had a lot of time on my hands. I mean, I was 13, so.
Sure, and the will to take on these challenges, that's the other thing. A lot of people would love certain anime, certain game, but they wouldn't take the work and the gumption it takes to actually make a website. They would say, well, just, I want to consume, give me more of this anime, but you actually wanted to put out. You have this kind of like vibrance and need to show the world how you're feeling and thinking about things and wanting to connect with on it. That's
yeah, I guess I've always been kind of a workaholic, and I like making stuff, and it really did all start with like making those fan websites though, like when I was 13. That was the beginning. A lot of it was on Neopets too. I learned how to write HTML on Neopets. So thank you, Neopets.
Holy crap. I don't know, for the listeners who may not be aware, I'm probably aging myself here. I'm sure people 10 years younger than me, it's just like, obviously, Neopets, guys. Everyone loves it. But that's, educate me on Neopets real quick, if you don't mind.
Okay. I guess it was like, I haven't used it in ages, but you would go onto the site and you could like adopt these little pets that were sort of represented by these like, cute sprites that kind of look like Sanrio characters in a way, I think. And you would adopt all these little pets and you would take care of them and you'd have to feed them. So it was kind of like Tamagotchi, but online. But there was also this element of like these guilds. So you could like join these communities within Neopets to like chat with other Neopets users and like, join all these like online clubs with them or whatever. And as a part of that, you could have like a home page for your guild, and I would like design the layouts for these guild pages, and like I'd make these like stupid layouts in Adobe Photoshop with like anime and video game characters and like sparkles and all the horrible brushes and filters, and then I would code them and I would like give them to my friends on Neopets.
God damn it. Where was I during the Neopets generation? I would have totally been swapping sparkly big-eyed dog.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, sounds like it, man. I'm wistful for a different age, but I get to know you now, so that's neat. Don't really complain. Yeah. Huh. Do you think that this is part of why? Because video games have been around for a while. They've been around, geez, I don't know, 45, 50 years, longer than that if you count like super old arcade games and stuff. But it's just been recently, I feel anyway, where you're seeing all these women taking to the medium and being like, yeah, this is mine too, obviously. Not even acting like, get a load of me, guys, it's woman time. Just like, no, I just happen to be a woman, and of course I'm going to make video games. Do you think it's because women your age in particular got to grow up with technology not being something that's like gendered and like women shouldn't use computers or whatever? The gender specifics around computers isn't a problem, at least as of now. Hopefully it never will be. But so you had computers open to you, and from there it led to web design, which led to programming, and then also video games. Do you think that was a big part of it?
I think it definitely is different, for girls of my age group, because I think there is still like a lot of gendered marketing. I mean, there is still a lot of gendered marketing today around computers, and I think there was definitely a lot back then too. And it also depended, like, for me it was interesting because growing up, my mom really wanted me to do theater, and that's actually what I started college as, was a theater major. And like I actually gave up web design for theater because my mom really wanted me to go off and be an actress. So my mom actually, for better or worse, sort of, she didn't really pressure me, but she really heavily urged me to sort of pursue theater, because she was like, you're so talented, and I felt really good that she thought I was talented at that, because she kind of hated that I liked video games and computers and stuff. So I ended up sort of going more in the direction of theater, but I've always been like, if you've played my game Ladylike, my relationship with my mom has been problematic over the years. So despite wanting to please her, I also wanted to sort of fight back and do like what I wanted, which was like computer stuff. So I think really early on, I only could use computers at the mall because we didn't have a computer. And then finally, I pressured my dad into getting me a computer when I was young, because I was like, oh, like I'll be so behind in school if I don't have a computer, blah, blah, blah. So I convinced my dad somehow. And my mom was like, oh, whatever. And then she was like annoyed that I was using it all the time. And so she was like, you need to get out and like do theater. And then I ended up doing a ton of theater. So I feel like my young life, I spent a lot of time being like pulled back and forth, like in this more kind of like theater direction by my mom, and she was like, oh, I want you to be like this beautiful actress, like dress really feminine and do all these things, whereas I wanted to like stay home and wear gross sweatshirts and eat like a box of Cheez-Its for dinner and code. That's like all I wanted to do. So I felt like, but I also really like theater, so I was kind of being tugged back and forth, and in the end I ended up going more with theater. And I think a lot of that was because my mom felt weird about me wanting to do computers, and she's like, you don't want to sit at a desk for the rest of your life, do you? That's what she would say, which is like, it's fine. She wanted me to like do what she thought I was passionate about, but I think a lot of that was, she didn't totally understand, because I wasn't really telling her either. I wasn't like, I really want to do computers. I was kind of like quiet about it. So I feel like there's probably some gender issues in there that I can't quite put my finger on, but that's sort of what happened with me. And I think that, other girls probably have similarly complex stories as to how they ended up becoming people who wanted to make games. I think it's always pretty complex. Because as a kid, you're pressured to do a lot of stuff, Whether you're a little girl, little boy, someone's going to be pressuring you to do something. So, I think there's a lot of factors that are at play in how people sort of find their way to what they're really passionate about, and gender definitely is a big part of that, and sometimes it is a big part of that and you can't even tell. So I don't know, it's interesting to think about, but I'm sure it was at play somewhere.
Yeah. How it sounds to me, and this could be totally wrong, but just to let you know, it sounds like your mom had an idea of what kind of little girl you would be happy being, and also probably that's the kind of little girl she would want, and it's very hard to tease out the difference between the little girl I want and just wanting to have a happy little girl who's not going to be judged and not going to be. And you do seem to me to have talent in expressing yourself, so I can see why she would want you to perform, but geez, that's pretty, I don't know.
I think it's interesting with my mom because she was actually a model and then wanted to do acting and then didn't ever really get a chance to do that. So I think that maybe part of it was that she wanted to see me succeed in this space that I had expressed interest in, that she was also really passionate about. So I think that was a big part of it too.
That makes a lot of sense. That was something else I was guessing, but felt like kind of a jerk to presume, was she an actress too? Nah.
Yeah, she wanted to be.
Yeah.
She never got a chance, but.
And are you acting in Cibele?
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
I play myself.
Yes, this is what I was hoping to hear. Because this is what I think the world needs, is on top of a lot of different things. Holy crap, a lot of questions came in. We're going to have to do those. Crap, there's stuff I wanted to ask you too that I didn't get to. All right, I'm going to give myself 4 minutes maybe, and then I'll get to your questions, everybody. But yes, combining theater and video games, it's about time that happened. Maybe it already has, but it should happen even more because norms suck, right? I mean, all norms, Jesus, what's the point of a norm? It's nice to have ethics and morals and it's not good to, I don't know, beat up dogs or something. That's, of course, rotten. We don't want that to become normal, but at the same time, I hear women saying it, men saying it, everybody saying it, the fact that I'm expected to be this kind of person or thing, if it's not a moral or ethical question, it's just a matter of I'm supposed to wear a suit because I'm a guy, I'm supposed to have muscles, I guess. This frustrates a lot of guys, and they're slaves to oftentimes this idea that, well, if I'm not normal, I guess I'm a reject, and defying that in any way possible. I just wish people would latch onto that and support people such as yourself who are willing to take the risk of being an outlier in terms of what is a normal thing to do with your video game, normal thing to do with your young adult life, what have you, because what you're doing is telling everybody your individual story is great, and please tell it, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing.
I try to lead by example.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Jeez. All right, I'm going to end on that comment because hopefully it sort of made sense, so I'll try to quit while I'm ahead.
It did.
And do questions. Let's see. Slow Holmes starts with, what do you draw on to intersect your narrative ideas with the mechanics of games? Great question, Slow Holmes. Are there any classic games with mechanics you feel could interface with more emotional, personal stories? Yeah, using game mechanic as metaphor for an emotional experience. Geez, that's tough. What do you draw on to come up with ideas for that?
I guess it depends. So, for something like How Do You Do It, I was rereading that poem and I read that part that I mentioned earlier where it was about my friend and I pretending our Barbie dolls were having sex and she ripped Ken's leg off. And when I was rereading that poem, I was like, whoa, that memory actually has a physical part to it. There's a really, really rich sort of interaction going on there where you're actually playing with the dolls, where the child's actually playing with the dolls, and what does that mean that she's actually physically interacting with these dolls? So when I was thinking about that memory, I was like, this is a very physical, visceral memory. So I think that there's definitely a part of me that's always looking for things like that in the stories I want to tell them. What's the physical sort of interaction that was happening there, and is that meaningful? And if it is, how can I explore it in the game? So that's kind of, where How Do You Do It came from. Whereas for something like my game Ladylike, or like Mangia, those are two games where the mechanic is largely text-based, so you're like engaging with conversations with people through like selecting which text you would like to select in order to proceed through the game. Sort of like, choose your own adventure style thing, but a little different. And that mechanic sort of came out of the fact that, when you're actually, it's supposed to be like exploring the character's relationship to the people she's talking to. So like allowing you to sort of explore a web of dialogue interactions with that person. Because I don't really ever design these more text-based games in branching narratives. They're actually usually webs. So it's always sort of a one big conversation that you have, but you can explore different parts of it, if that kind of makes sense. So, that's sort of how I think of these more dialogue-based games. When I want to think about dialogue as a mechanic, I think of it as a web, and like, how can I let the player explore different parts of this greater conversation, rather than having it be like separate stories happening within the game, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, totally.
And as far as classic games go, I think I know Anna Anthropy says a lot of really smart stuff about this, and like if you play Dysphoria, you can see her using some like Tetris mechanics and like Mario game mechanics, and like taking them out of the context of those original games and putting them into the context of her story, of her like transition. And I think that that's a really powerful way to sort of repurpose these mechanics that players are already really familiar with. And I feel really strongly that like her method of doing that is really powerful, and very effective. I don't think I've really done that as much in my own games, but that's something I'm really interested in. I think that her, I'm sure she's written about that somewhere, and the things she said about her are really smart. I would highly recommend checking that out.
Yeah, in terms of design, she's like, just makes me feel like an idiot. I'm like, I can't believe, how did you notice that? Like her awareness of how design reflects on what the design of being a human being, and what kind of how we tackle problem solving all the time, and how that can be expressed in games. She's just freaking brilliant at it. I was thinking today about, because I wrote about you a little bit for Destructoid. I like did a shameless plug of this episode on the front page of Destructoid. I'm like, how am I going to come up with a shameless plug today? This game I'm interested in is called 50 Pinch Barrage, which already sounds kind of sexual to me, like little pinch, And it's reminded me of Anthropy as well, who made Mighty Jill-Off, which takes like the mechanics of really hard platformers and applies it to like an SMM romantic sexual relationship, and how they're the same. Like the pain feels like you're connected to whoever's inflicting the pain, and you like get to know them and overcome the pain they challenge you with. It's kind of, like really hard 2D platformers like 2D Pinch Barrage are sort of, maybe, I don't know, are they metaphors for making it? Maybe. Like this game, the guy comes up to a problem, and it'll be like a crocodile, and you hear, and then the crocodile gets him, and he goes, ah! And you're like, that was a total, he built up to it, and it happened. Something happened.
It sounds like they're trying to get at something specific there.
Or I'm just reading into it too much because I'm like repressed or something. And I don't think so. I'd have to have somebody, an analyst, tell me if I'm repressed. And freaking Smash Brothers. Do you see potential? Because I don't know if you've played Smash Brothers, but like
I have.
You're all buddies, and you're like poking at each other a little bit, and like your percentage is rising, and you're feeling it building up, and steam comes off of them now.
That idea.
Yeah, and then it, like hit you with like, I'm gonna build up to something so good, and bam, and they're flying in sparkles and colors. And
no, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up, because like people ask me about sex in games a lot, so I end up thinking about it a lot. And one thing I think is really interesting is that there's this sort of like, if you're having sex with someone, there's this sort of sense of discovery that goes along with that, like within the experience itself, where you're kind of like, it's like a very moment-to-moment kind of thing, where you're like both kind of like excited, and you have this like sort of shared sense of discovery of like each other and everything. And I think that that's very similar to the feeling that you get in playing some kinds of games that like Smash, where you're really excited about the game and like new things are constantly happening and you're sort of with other people and there's this like general atmosphere of like excitement. And I feel like that feeling of discovery is sort of shared between games like that and
Sure.
like actually having sex. It's like kind of, I don't know if that's weird, but I think
Not
about that
weird
a
at
lot.
all. Yeah, I was thinking it too. So we're both weird, maybe. You kind of like try things out with each other in Smash. You're like, oh, that didn't really work. Oh, wow, that really worked. You should
Yeah.
try that again. You know, it's like the same sort of.
Exactly.
But the problem, of course, is, you know, then that leads me to think, wouldn't it be awesome if somebody made a game actually about having sex? And they're very rare. Like one of the few I've played. There's a game called Incredible Crisis, which I should probably mail to you. I know you're friends with Diego Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
Playing a lot of games like this, so I can mail it to you guys to play.
Awesome.
There's one level
Right.
where, yeah, it's a Japanese like pre-WarioWare random game. There's one game where you're getting like a back rub, or you're giving one, and you get like advice from a woman, but you don't see her because you're on a Ferris wheel, and she's just like, right there. And then you like keep pressing X, and she's like, "Oh, it feels pretty good, yeah," like fake orgasm talk. But it's played off for laughs. It's like as close as I've really seen to actually trying.
Well, Luxuria Superbia really, I think, does that kind of well in a very minimalist way. Have you played Luxuria Superbia?
No, what's say the name again? Sorry, I missed it.
Luxuria Superbia.
What happened to that?
It's by Tale of Tales. It's a really interesting game. It doesn't explicitly say that it's about sex, but it's definitely erotic in nature, and I'm pretty sure it's like about sex. Like it has to be. And it's kind of like, how do I explain it? So I think the best way to play it is on like an iPad or a touchscreen device, and like the whole game is like you're moving forward through the space that I think at times kind of looks like you're in a vagina, and like there's like these little things, and you're sort of like rubbing it. You're like rubbing the screen. You should read. Lee Alexander wrote a really good review of this game, and she talks about this stuff. And so you're sort of moving forward through the space, and like the whole sort of mechanic of the game is sort of about kind of trying to, I think, please the space and like in the most in the best way possible. And you sort of like get, I don't know, it's not, I don't really, I'm trying to remember. It's like you get a better score or something if you like do a better job of pleasing the space.
Sure.
So it's all about like you like start rubbing your iPad, and it's like this really like erotic experience, especially if you're like playing and other people around. They're like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you rubbing your iPad like that?" Like, if you get really into it, it gets really sexual.
Sure.
So you should check that game out. It's really,
I
really
will.
good.
I remember now, as you talk about that woman, I can't remember her name because it's years ago, like 2006. She wanted to make a DS game to teach women to masturbate called Lapis.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, and it was like total. But the thing about it is, we can make video games where it's like, I am killing Mario. That's okay, right? Or I'm shooting strangers. That's fun. But like, make a game about actually rubbing part of your body. She had to like disguise it in all this metaphor, like it's a bunny's nose, and the bunny likes it when you pet it this way, but not this way. And it's like, wonder why there's this fear about being explicit about it. Like people are going to be judged for being abnormal, for being perverts, because it's not the norm or something to like sex. I'm still trying to figure people out.
Yeah, it's not good. That attitude is, I think, destructive in a lot of ways. Because we should be able to talk about that stuff. Like, it's really important. So
I wonder how they could make a Smash Brothers, because I don't want sex and violence to be equated. I just want them all to have sex. Like, I want them to be hitting each other, but not hitting each other. It's somehow like, making each other happy until they explode.
You gotta read more fan fiction. You gotta go out there and find your Lennon fanfic.
I probably should. It's not actually, genuinely erotic to me, but it's just a nice idea for them all to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Kalian May asks, is there something you feel autobiographical games can deliver that games that are fictional may not be able to?
One thing that comes to mind is just like, as a designer, I think that, when you're making, or at least for me, when I make autobiographical games, I get this really intense sense of satisfaction. What's the word when like, I'm trying to remember what the word is. Mm-hmm. It's like when you really get something out there, I can't remember the word, but like it basically just is a very satisfying feeling to tell your own story. So it may, like, I think you can tell a powerful story whether it's autobiographical or not, but ultimately if it feels good to you to tell that story, then that's like something that an autobiographical game may do best by like giving you sort of a space within which to tell your own story and to make yourself feel good by telling that story.
Mm.
So I think that that's really important. And I think it's important to like, not only think about the players all the time, like sometimes think about yourself. Like if there's a game that you want to make for yourself, that's equally as valid as wanting to make a game that sells millions of copies to people all over the world. I think both kinds of games are really important. So autobiographical games are really good at, making you feel good about yourself if you choose to use them in that way. And I think that that's something they have the unique ability to do. I think other kinds of games can do that too, but autobiographical games are really well suited for that too.
Yeah, because it's really you that you're sharing with people, and when they really get it, it's like someone
Oh,
understands me. That is so good.
it's
Yes.
cathartic. It's cathartic.
Cathartic. Very good. Very, very good.
Incredibly
And how-
cathartic.
And to bring it back to Final Fantasy X, how would you have felt if you found out that that little vignette, which sounds like it made the whole experience feel all the more real, less like, well, I need to tell a story because that's what's going to sell, and more like, I just needed to put this part in the game. So you feel like you're getting a piece of somebody's passion when you get a
Yeah.
scene like that. What if you found out that was based on like a true story? How would you have felt?
I mean, that would be really powerful. I would just
Yeah.
be like, it's really amazing that, whichever designer put that in the game was able to like do that, to like get it in such an interesting way. I mean, that's a big deal. I think it's really
Yeah.
powerful when you
I
can do
can't
that.
help but, maybe this is my bias showing, but when I find out that a game I'm playing is based on who the person who made it, who they really are, what they want to do with their life, or what has happened in their life, when it's really a little piece of them, I care about it a lot more.
hmm
Was that, I think. So, yeah. Blarg asks, how has anime influenced your work? And how did you think of your Twitter handle? Because it's genius. So nice to see Blarg.
So I guess anime's influenced my work just because it's like, is this weird? Is it weird to say anime influenced my life? I mean, it
No,
kind of did. Like,
no.
I think we're all sort of shaped by the media we consume in a lot of ways. And, I've been watching a lot of anime ever since I was a kid. Like I said before, I was making all those fan sites. Like, I was illegally downloading anime when I was like 12. Seriously, like I downloaded Chobits when I was 12 or something. I was so young. And
Which one
like
is Chobits again?
so it's about it's by Clamp, and it's about like a girl robot. It's really good. You should watch it. It's weird, but it's about like a society in which the computers can be shaped like human women.
Okay.
And like one of them like becomes kind of sentient, and like I don't know, it's cool. So like I was watching a ton of anime when I was younger, and so that now I have all those stories floating around in my head, and that having read tons of books and watched tons of anime and watched tons of movies and whatnot, like that's all stuff that I can draw upon now for my work. Like it just gives me more sort of inspiration for what I do in my own creative work, if that kind of makes sense. Like I think that as a creative person, it's really important to, look at other people's work too. So, I watch a ton of anime still. Like I've been rewatching all of Sailor Moon. It's amazing. I still love it so much. This is as much as I did when I first watched it. And, getting excited about those kinds of stories is always really inspiring to me to like, try and make my stories be as interesting and amazing. So, they're just a part of my brain now. The anime is
Sure.
everywhere.
Yeah. What do you think attracted you? Because not everybody loved anime. I don't think anyway. I loved it as a teenager. Geez, Tenchi Mio, Ranma
Oh,
One
yeah.
Half was kind of my. And one of the things I loved particularly about Ranma One Half, it was like, all right, so men and women can be kind of the same, which is neat, and also kind of. When I found out that Rumiko Takahashi had made it, and she was the #1 most popular comics artist who was a woman in the world, it's kind of the gender norms thing, and helped me let go of that a little bit. Was that any of the attraction to you, to know that? Because there's so many anime stories that are about a woman's sexuality, a teenage girl's sexuality even. That's one of the things that you strike me as someone who's doing things with that a lot of people would be afraid to do. A lot of women women to talk about their sexuality at all, and there was anime just like putting it all out there a lot of the time. Was that part of it?
Yeah. So I think that some of the earliest, like some of the anime that really got me into anime were like Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura, which are both anime with strong like women character leads. Well, women, I mean they're like teenage girl lead
Sure.
characters, which is even better when you're young. You know, you want to be able to like consume media that's about strong characters that are of your sort of age group. That feels good to see. So when I was a kid, I was watching Cardcaptor Sakura and Sailor Moon and getting super excited and being like, oh my god, I want to be a magical girl too, and like all that stuff. So I think that I feel like Sailor Moon just like, I don't know, now I just want to make stuff that's like Sailor Moon, I guess. I just like making stuff about women. And I feel like it's because a lot of those animes that I really liked were about women too, especially the two I just mentioned.
Sure.
And actually, I just forgot to answer my Twitter handle question.
Oh, right.
I also definitely like, I didn't watch so much hentai as a kid as I did download like CG sets from hentai games. I would like collect, like, because people would download all the CGs from hentai games and package them up in zip files and like share them on IRC or whatever. And I would download all of them because some of the pictures were really pretty. And then I would also get like the hentai from that, and I was like, what's this? So I discovered hentai when I was really, really young, just because I was like, I want all these pretty anime pictures, and then these packages also had hentai in them. And then I guess I came up with the name. Someone I used to date, I think, said it as a joke. I think at the time I was probably thinking about, I was like maybe applying to PhD programs or something, and he was like, oh, like you can be a hentai PhD, and I was like, oh my god, I want to change my Twitter handle to that. So it was sort of a result of a conversation, and like, I talk about hentai in casual conversation a lot because like, I don't know, it just comes up. I guess my friends are weird. I don't know. But
I don't
when I was
think
a kid,
hentai is that weird. It's just sex and cartoons, and people like cartoons, people like
it's
sex.
pretty niche. I just mean it's like niche, in a way. So like,
I
guess
don't know
it's
if
like
it is.
random that it comes up in conversation a lot. I guess it makes sense now because my handle is hentai PhD, so people are like, so you must watch tons of hentai. And I'm like, I've seen hentai, and I have a lot of thoughts about it, and that's a funny Twitter handle. So
What are your thoughts on hentai now that we're talking about it?
I think that there's a lot of bad hentai, and there's good hentai too. Just like with any, medium, there's going to be good and bad stuff. I think, it's problematic, but ultimately I think it's important to sort of look for, like, be critical of the media we consume. I think that's kind of when I talk about, like, I think about hentai a lot because I'm like, it's a really good example of something where, like, people are so quick to be like, oh, like, why are you talking about hentai? It's just, like, gross. And it's like, actually, like, why don't you think about it critically and be like, why do you think it's gross? Or, like, I'm sure there's, like, there's actually good hentai out there that, like, maybe isn't derogatory in some ways and whatnot. So it's just, I don't know, it's such, like, a controversial topic, I think, and I'm sort of interested in thinking about it in a critical way. So, like, I guess I like to talk about it in that respect a lot, if that makes any sense.
Sure, you like to analyze it, you like to be smart about it, and you don't want to just throw it offhand. You don't want to throw it all out as definitely bad because it's, pervy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on how it's done. I know a lot of guys who get in a trap where, like, the only female characters they really identify with and care about and relate to are hentai characters because it's so much easier when you're dealing with a drawing to relate, but they're relating to a woman, which is awesome, and they're like caring about the women in these stories, but when they end up trying to relate with in real life women, it gets a lot more complicated. I walk in a strange life myself, so I've run into some people who, maybe, but they're more, quotes, normal than you think. There's just everyone's too ashamed to talk about it, so you don't find out. I know quite a few people in that world. Anthony Tufo asks, do you have a favorite dating sim and or visual novel?
That's a good question.
Favorites are always hard. If you have like some favorites or one of your favorites might help.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if I really have a favorite, but I think one thing I would say is that you should read Kara Ellison's S.exe column because she talks about a bunch of really, like, interesting dating sims and visual novels in that. And there was one time where she and I were hanging out and we played DC Da Capo together, which is a visual, like a dating sim hentai game, and she wrote a piece on it, and there's a video of us playing it, and it's really hilarious. And I don't know if I like the game as a game, but playing it was like kind of funny because Kara's a hilarious person, and the game was kind of silly. So yeah, you should like go
DC
look
Da
at that.
Capo? That's what it's
Yeah,
called?
so we played it because I remembered it was one of the first like hentai games that I encountered as a kid when I was like looking on forums and stuff, and I was like, oh, these like girl characters are so pretty, I wonder what this is, and then it ended up being this like hentai. So I'd always wanted to play it just to like see what it was because I remember seeing it as a kid, and then we played it. It was like pretty interesting.
Huh, interesting. So it was a pornographic cartoon that you, as a kid you were like, this looks appealing.
Yeah, well, like,
Just-
no, because a lot of the game is just like they're like at school or whatever, and like it's just got like, I guess I don't know if I like the art style as much anymore, but when I was younger I was like, oh, this art style is really beautiful, and I like wanted to set it as my wallpaper or whatever.
Oh, sure.
And then I was like looking up more about it. There's also an anime of it actually that is not a hentai. But for the hentai game, you know, in Googling it, I came across sort of the more pornographic images from the game and was like, oh, so that's what this game is about.
It speaks to me how hentai, you know, if you look at Western pornographic cartoons or whatever, it looks like you get the feeling right off the bat, like they're going for realism, they're going for like sweaty, shiny skin. Whereas hentai, you don't know it's hentai until it's hentai. You're like, oh, it looks like anime, cute. Oh, wait, what are they doing? And as a kid, here you are, living proof. Young girls could watch hentai and not turn out.
I mean, it's all over the internet. If you're like Googling around for anime, it's hard to miss. So I was doing a lot of that and running into a lot of hentai.
Sure. I'm excited about this generation proving to everyone, being exposed to sexuality in a way where it's not abusive or not harmful or not being controlled by it. Just stumbling upon hentai on the internet will not turn you into a depraved, lonely, sad, destroyed person. Because you don't seem destroyed. And you,
no, I'm not. I'm doing pretty good.
You seem to be doing very good. Mark Little asks, do you play games like Call of Duty? Or have you ever? I'd want to tack that on to Mark's question.
Yeah. I mean, I've played all sorts of games. I mean, as someone who's now, you know, being a game designer, I, you know, try to play as many games as I can just because I think it's really important to know, like, what is important in the field that you're working in, you know, and that you're, like, designing in.
Sure.
So I've played Call of Duty before. I'm not like a huge FPS person. I tend to prefer like, you know, Final Fantasy, like JRPGs and like action adventure games and stuff like that. But you know, I recently played The Last of Us, which is a third-person shooter, and I hesitated playing it for a while because I was like, oh, like not super into shooters. Like they make me really anxious, so it's just I find it hard to play, and I can't really handle the gore. But I decided to play it because so many people spoke so highly of it, and I was so glad I played it. So I try to keep a really open mind about these things. And you know, when the shooter parts get a little too tough for me, I'll just like ask a friend to help me out because you know, I take it seriously. Like I want to play all these games and like see what, you know, what is interesting out there. So you know, I play Call of Duty. It's not my favorite game, but you know, it's interesting because it's such a big deal. You know, you have to take that seriously. Like it's a huge cultural artifact, so it's really interesting to look at it from that perspective.
Absolutely, and you can assess how well it's made and that sort of thing without really being interested in the objectives of the game and the fantasy of being a soldier shooting those other soldiers. Doesn't seem like, I can't imagine you thinking, I want to be a fake soldier and shoot some soldiers. Neither do I, but it's still, it's good to know.
It's not something I'm like going to be super excited about, but I think it's important to, you know, pay attention to it because it's important, and I want to play I'll play any games, honestly. Like, I just want to play tons of games all the time. So I'm open to pretty much whatever, and I just want to, you know, try and think critically about it and see how I feel for myself.
I want them to make Call of Duty for you somehow. Like, I'm really excited about you liking all the video games.
I want it to be about magical girls.
This is what I was thinking. Magical girls, like, stopping crimes, solving problems, sending love letters to cute
Yeah.
people, making cute
No,
people happy.
we need like there needs to be like the people who made Call of Duty need to make like a Madoka Magica video game. That would be really interesting.
For
Like a
the
Madoka Magica first-person shooter.
what? Forgive my ignorance.
Oh,
Madoka.
oh my
What is
gosh,
that?
Madoka Magica is a magical girl anime, and it's really good, and you should definitely watch it.
Okay.
It's I don't know how to explain it. It's definitely influenced by something like Sailor Moon in that it's like sort of on the darker end of the magical girl spectrum. Like it's got some like very serious themes and everything. And there's like actually a lot of violence in it. But I know there's Madoka video games out there. I haven't gotten a chance to play any of them, but I would love to see a Call of Duty style Madoka game. I feel like that could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people, because Call of Duty feels like it has the whole audience, but if you look at how many people play Call of Duty versus people who play video games in general, if you count Candy Crush and Minecraft as video games,
Yeah.
they don't have everybody yet. They could widen that net a little bit with some magical girl fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if they do it. I think we need people like you to work
I
at
know.
Treyarch and Infinity Ward in order to make it, because the people
Like we're
who would
making
get,
a Madoka game.
I think a lot of people would buy it. Dave Waldron, and hi Dave. He is a foreign man and a nice man. He actually backed the show. Thank you for backing it. I just sent him his backer
Oh, cool.
rewards last week. He asks, how do the real-world people you've referenced or recreated in your games feel about being in the games and how you've represented them? Yeah. So as your mom played Ladylike, that would be, or other people, have they seen themselves or approximations of themselves in your games? How do they react?
Yeah, something I think about a lot actually, because I definitely never want to make someone uncomfortable by putting them in one of my games, so I try to be really, really careful about that and very conscious of it. So sometimes in some of my games I've changed names and, tried to keep out any personal details. That's something I do a lot, especially when I'm not in contact with the person, but I still want to have them as a character in the game. So that's one thing that I do. And for people who, like my mom, for example, my mom hasn't really played any of my games. She played the first game that I made, and then she didn't play any of the others. But she does, like, talk to other people who's played them, and she thinks that my games are too dark. She thinks they're too sad. That's basically her opinion of it. And she's like, it's cool that you're making games about yourself, but I think they're too dark. You should make happier games. And I'm like, maybe that's kind of true sometimes. I do make a lot of sad games. But, she's just like, whatever. She doesn't really care that much. And Emmett, my boyfriend, who is he's in Cibele, and that's interesting. He's not actually playing himself, but he's physically in it, so that's been kind of interesting. But he was also in Mangia, because he was helping me out a lot when I was really sick. And it was interesting because I feel like he was just like whatever with being in the game. Like he was just like, oh yeah, it's like the games that you make. Like I'm glad that I am able to be a part of it. But then there's like a part where I talk about where we like have sex this one time in the game, and his like coworkers I think played it and were like, it was really weird when we had to play the part where you and Nina were having sex. I was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So usually some of the weirdness is just like my friends playing it and being like, so awkward to play a game about you while you're like sitting next to me.
Yeah, because it is. You strike me again as a person whom, in the process of creating, you like don't think, oh yeah, everyone's actually gonna know this. You're probably just thinking like, I'm making a thing, and like,
Yeah.
Can I make this thing? And oh, it's made, I did it. And then after the fact, you actually have to have the fallout of people knowing all that stuff about you. Yeah,
Yep.
and thinking about it. Well, I hope that you never catch on to the fact that people are gonna actually play all the things you make. Because I never want you to be
I
first
hope
with
they do.
Yeah, self-consciousness, it doesn't do a heck of a lot for us. It doesn't help, so I'm glad you've been able to reject it a lot of the time. Oh, and speaking of time, we're almost out of time. There's so much I had in my head to talk to you about. I wonder if I got to all of it. Is there anything we missed that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. I mean, any
Maybe
other
not.
questions, I'm down. I
Yeah,
feel
questions
like,
may come in.
yeah.
Yeah, you're doing it. There's a comic book This is going to count as collusion. I won't be allowed to review any games you make after this. Ding dong. But there's a comic book I was recently sent that I want to mail to you. You might like it. It's called In Real Life. It's about a teenage girl playing MMOs. It's
Ooh, awesome!
Yeah,
I would
it's
love
kinda like,
that.
yeah. It's written by a dude based on a short story he wrote called Anda's Game, because the main character is named Anda. It's like an Ender's Game play.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really nice illustrations. Jen Wang, I think, drew it, and it doesn't like get too caught up in like she's a woman playing video games, guys, and like MMOs are the way of the future. It just takes them for granted as like, yeah, women play MMOs. Here's a thing that happens while she's playing an MMO, and she makes friends on the MMO. She learns about gold farming economics, blah blah blah. It's pretty neat. Yeah, I'll send it along.
Yeah, actually, speaking of comics, I'm really excited because the artist that I'm working on, Cibele with, she does illustration work and comics work and stuff, and her work is really amazing. Her name's Rebecca Dunlap, and you should totally check her stuff out.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I know you're into comics, so you might like her stuff. She's really, really awesome.
Yeah. I'm into comics. Not as much as I used to be. But when I love them now, I really, really love them. I think that tends to happen when you get really into a medium. You like, instead of just loving the medium as a whole, you love it when it speaks to you so much, and when it doesn't speak to you, it's just like, yeah, totally over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Have you gotten that way with games? Like when you love a game, do you like totally, totally love it, but it's harder for games to impress you these days?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't have as much time to play games as I usually do recently, which makes me kind of sad. I feel like what I like to do is, I guess when I play a game that I really love, I get like super into it, and it's all I'll talk about for like the rest of the month or something. Like when I played Kentucky Route Zero, especially Acts 2 and 3, I literally like couldn't stop talking about it for like a month. It was just so amazing. So I do get kind of like obsessive about it, and like, but yeah, also I really like going back and revisiting games that I remember liking as a kid. So which is why I've been replaying Final Fantasy X, which I've been like, I've loved it forever. I mean, you know, I was making all those fan websites as a kid. I feel like, you know, I still have that kind of a personality where I'm like, I'm just gonna be like the biggest fan of this thing and like just like come up with this like fan fiction, whatever. I should still write fan fiction. I haven't written fan fiction in ages, but
It's really, I haven't either. I've done some weird fan comics. Like I did a comic about, do you know Pigpen from Charlie Brown? He's the
yes.
dirty one.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I was related with him the most because I was a kid.
Oh.
Yeah, I like thought, what are his parents like? So I made like his mom is like a clean freak that like won't let him into the parties and judges him, and his dad is a astrologist who loves the stars, whereas he loves like the minutia, like he just looks at the dirt on him, and it's like it's so fascinating, this whole world of crust all over my hand and stuff like that. I drew that thinking about Pigpen really hard one afternoon, but
That's
writing
awesome.
fan fiction. Oh, thanks. That's very kind of you to say. I've never talked about that comic before. I just made it myself and then put it in a drawer. It's just
I love
over
that.
there.
No, you should like share it. That sounds so cute. Charlie Brown's awesome. I love Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown is super awesome. One of the first icons in comic strips that I can think of. All right. I spent the last couple minutes of our thing talking about Charlie Brown. I totally. This was one of those episodes where it's like, don't screw it up. Let her talk the whole mess up, and then I ended up talking, and then I talked about Charlie Brown. You sure?
We talked so much about Final Fantasy X. You got to give Charlie Brown a little love too.
Yeah. Wow. Wouldn't it be cool? Charlie Brown Final Fantasy crossover. Oh, Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. He's totally the Charlie Brown of Final Fantasy. That would be.
Oh yeah.
I did want to ask.
Charlie Brown JRPG would be pretty good.
So good. Man, why are people making these things? Has it aged well? You feel Final Fantasy X now that you're replaying it? Because you've aged. The games.
Yeah.
You're different. Has it been different to re-experience it now?
Yeah, very, very different. I noticed like that little story I told earlier about finding that little vignette in the game is something that I don't think I would have noticed as much when I was younger. So I'm noticing those small things in the game a lot more. And I'm also noticing that there's definitely some problematic objectification of women in that game that I'm not very down with. I still love the game, but there's some, with Riku and like taking her clothes off, it definitely pans up and down her body in such a way that feels a little like, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I get you want me to like look at her boobs right now, which is kind of annoying. But I really, really appreciate what they do with character building. And I'm paying a lot of attention to that because that's something that I feel like I want to do more of that as a designer. I want to like get better at that. And I feel like that game had some really great character building, and especially with those little vignettes, I'm like looking for all of those tiny vignettes so I can just like get a sense of like all these different sort of things that they were trying to explore in sort of the ambient like parts of the game that are not directly related to the plot. So yeah, also filling out the sphere grid is so satisfying, and I feel like I didn't like it as much when I was younger, but I'm like, oh, I could just fill out the sphere grid all day. I don't know why. I find it like relaxing.
Yeah, well, compared to having to put yourself on the line and make a game, you're getting to complete something. Yeah. Well, I could go on and on. Hopefully you can come on the show again sometime, because I think we're out of time.
No, this is great.
Hentai PhD, one word or a dash in there?
For Twitter?
Yes.
It's Hentai PhD, one word.
Oh, okay. Very good. And your games are at?
My site is http://ninasays.so. So I'm going to type that in the chat.
Sure. I don't know if the people will see it.
Oh yeah,
I see
but
it.
that's how you spell it.
Nina
so it's
says.
ninasays.so, and if you go to my Twitter profile, my website's there in my Twitter bio as well. And if you just click on games, that's where all my games are that I have online. So there's also a link to a mailing list for Cibele if anyone's interested in learning more about it. We're going to be releasing some news about that hopefully within the next month or so that'll be exciting.
Awesome. Yes, very exciting.
Yeah.
As for me, I'm at TronNots on Twitter. You can watch the show later on YouTube, youtube.com/SupHolmes Show. You can listen to it later, iTunes, Libsyn. Just Google SupHolmes and iTunes Libsyn. Tons of episodes. We had Emmett on forever ago with Diego talking about Heads Up Hot Dogs, their hot dogs game on the phone. Might as well get their hot dogs game while you're at it. It's like $1 or something. It's super cheap. Hot dogs drop on people's heads. Very good game, in my opinion.
So good.
Yeah,
Emmett's actually in the room next to me working on Cibele right now.
Oh, neat. I said hi. It's been a long time.
I will.
Yeah, he's a good
Thanks so
person.
much for having me, by the way. This was really fun.
Oh, my pleasure. Next time I'll do better. Man,
No, it was great.
We didn't talk about vignettes enough. Vignettes. Next time, more vignettes. You promise?
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Promise. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.